안녕하세요. I'm MJ from Learn Korean in 30 Second YouTube channel. I completely understand why you're here. When to use 는 or 이가 is most confusing and frustrating to Korean learners. Even for people who lived in Korea for many years, this topic is not easy. I'm here to help you out. We'll see how this video can help you out with that. I'll explain it as simply as possible to make things very clear for you in a different method from former textbooks. First, let's watch a short clip.
우리 엄마 음식이 어때?
김치는 맛있어. 뭐라고?
What happened in the video was that Rex said kimchi is delicious, but Tae-woo was a little bit offended. This is because 는 adds an implication to the topic. 김치는 implies that the rest of the food is not so delicious. This video demonstrates the important reason why correctly understanding 는, 이, 가 is very important when learning Korean. Otherwise, your speech might sound unnatural, awkward, or even cause misunderstanding in worst cases. I will explain in detail later, so for now, forget about all the textbook stuff you learned, such as subject marker or topic marker, and just remember this. The most common use of 는 is when you are drawing a contrast, or when you want to put focus on the subject's action or description. In explanatory situations, it's also often used when talking about the subject's characteristics, especially if there is already some context. On the other hand, 이, 가 is used when the subject itself is the focus of the sentence. It's also what you use to introduce the subject newly into a context. As you can see, 이, 가 feels a bit simpler. You might have thought the translations of these sentences were the same and felt really confused. And you're right, both translations are indeed the same. But the most important thing when learning Korean is that you can't just look at a single sentence in isolation and translate it into English. It might sound a bit strong, but translating Korean directly into English is not the right way to learn. You must understand the context in which the sentence is used. Another important feature of Korean is that depending on your intonations, the meaning can be completely different. Let me show you something. When you say 고양이가 귀여워요, my intonation was very plain. But if I say 고양이가 귀여워요, you can sense that I'm putting a focus on the cat. It is like saying cat is the one that is cute. When you say like this, probably the context was someone misunderstood what you said as 개가 귀엽다고요? Then you might answer, 아니요, 고양이가 귀여워요. In English, no, the cat is the one that is cute. You can see that without paying close attention to the context and the way it is said in terms of intonation, Korean cannot really be translated accurately into English. This example shows why 이가 is called subject marker. Basically, 이가 is used when you are putting the focus on the subject. Now, let's see why context is important in Korean. 는 often has context around it and not used alone. 고양이는 귀여워요. It implies that you are drawing a contrast with cat, such as 개가 귀엽진 않아요. 고양이는 귀여워요. It is like dogs are not cute, however, cats are cute. Especially for 는, context matters a lot because it often has contrasting implication of subjects, action, or description. You might be wondering why I'm talking about intonation and context as I explained 는 and 이가. That's because understanding the importance of context and intonation is the key of using 이, 가, and 는 correctly. Korean is all about intonation and context. That's why Korean often use different intonations and a lot of filler words in speech, such as 아, 그렇죠, or 그건 아니에요. Intonation plays a key role in Korean speech. This is something you've likely found very interesting when hearing Koreans speak. Using the same example sentences, I will show you a good example in another situation. For instance, in a children's textbook, if you want to describe a cat's image, it is better to say 고양이가 귀여워요 rather than 고양이는 귀여워요 because there is no context around the sentence and you are simply introducing the subject. Let me show you how 는 can be used. You are with your friend and you are explaining your cat at your home. You say, 집에 고양이가 있는데요. 제 고양이는 회색이에요. 제 고양이는 부침성도 아주 좋죠. You can see you introduce your cat first using 가, newly into a context. Then you continue using 는 to describe the subject further in the existing context of the subject introduced by 가. Or 는 is used to contrast something in contrasting context. You are talking to your friend saying 걔는 안 귀여워요. Then you say together with but. 그런데 고양이는 귀여워요. This means I don't find dogs are cute, but cats are cute, and emphasizing cat's characteristic that it is cute. So, it is all about context when using these particles. Do not try to only translate these sentences as cat is cute, but you must think about context together to correctly translate it and understand it properly. That's why Korean learners find 는, 이가 very hard. As you can see, the reason why Korean learners find these particles so hard is either you translate it into English without any context, or it is so hard to understand when to exactly use it. Let's have a similar example. This is most common textbook example as this is commonly used in practice. You might have learned that when introducing yourself, you say 저는 태우입니다, not 제가 태우입니다. And you may be wondering, but you said 이가 is used to introduce the subject. Exactly speaking, you are not introducing the subject itself, but introducing the subject into a new context. In other words, you bring the subject into a new context. Think about the physical situation when you say 저는 태우입니다. You are already facing each other and the other person is aware of your presence. In other words, context. So you are not really bringing yourself in as a new subject, but rather you explain about you in the existing context where everyone is introducing themselves. In the existing context of you and others, you are describing your name, which is a characteristic of the subject. So, introducing the subject does not literally mean introducing the subject as a new information, but introducing the subject into a new context. This is a subtle but a very important key point between 이가 and 는. By now, you know you can't just translate all these sentences as I think Tae-woo is smart. Instead of translations, try to think of the proper context where it is properly used depending on particles. Let's go through them one by one. The first one, 저는 태우가 똑똑하다고 생각해요. In this sentence, you, yourself, is not the focus of the sentence, but your act is the focus, which is thinking. But, depending on the context, this might have an implication that your thinking is contrasting to others' thinking. Meaning, others might not be thinking Tae-woo is smart, but your thinking is different. But here, you are not contrasting Tae-woo's smartness with others, but just describing Tae-woo is smart. the expression of the contrast can be often represented by your intonation, such as 저는 태우가 똑똑하다고 생각해요. Or 저는 태우가 똑똑하다고 생각해요. It is like you are saying, at least I think differently, by your intonation. However, when you say in a flat way, 저는 태우가 똑똑하다고 생각해요. Then, this sentence can just mean, I think 태우 is smart. The second one, 저는 태우는 똑똑하다고 생각해요. Here, the key difference from the first sentence is that you are implying others are not as smart as 태우, because using 는 contrast 태우's smartness. That's why this sentence can be used when you want to show that others might not think 태우 is smart, highlighting both your contrasting opinion and 태우's outstanding intelligence. But please don't misunderstand. 는 is not always used for contrast. Remember, 는 can also be used to explain the subject's actions or characteristics within an existing context. And again, and again, it's all about the context. A single sentence in isolation cannot really be translated into English correctly. Also, intonation matters. The third one, 제가 태우가 똑똑하다고 생각해요. This emphasizes that you are the one who thinks 태우 is smart. 제가, I'm the one. However, 태우가 here is not emphasizing 태우 because 가 is used in a subclass where the focus is already on you by 제가. So, 태우가 is just used to simply state information about 태우. This sentence is typically used when someone asks, who thinks 태우 is smart? In Korean, 누가 태우가 똑똑하다고 생각해? The last one, 제가 태우는 똑똑하다고 생각해요. This has the same emphasis that you are the one who thinks 태우 is smart. But at the same time, you are drawing a contrast that others are not as smart as 태우. This sentence can be used when someone asks, who thinks 태우 is extra smart? In Korean, 누가 태우는 똑똑하다고 생각하지? So, when you see 는, 이가, always think about the context around the sentence and how it is spoken in terms of intonation. Never try to translate it in isolation. Changing the way you think about it will make learning 는, 이가 much easier and speed up your learning curve. It'll also help you translate Korean more accurately. Now, pause the video and take some time to think about these sentences. Try saying them with different intonations and notice how the meaning changes. Also, think about what questions these sentences could answer. Please leave your questions about these sentences in the comments. Let's move to the next example. Like I said 100 times already, 는 is for explaining the subject's characteristics in an existing context, and 이가 is for introducing the subject into a new context. You will often see this pattern where 이가 is used first, and then 는 is used later, especially in explanatory context. The first 이가 is used to introduce the subject into a new context, and then, when you explain more about the subject's characteristics or actions, you use 는. The example on the screen is a perfect case. If you start the sentence with 옛날 옛적에 공주는 성에 살았어요, it sounds very weird. So, you first introduce the subject with 이가 into the context, and then 는 explains the subject's action or characteristics later in the existing context. Another thing you might notice is, in these examples, 는 doesn't show any contrast at all. It is simply used for explanation. This happens in explanatory context often. But remember, ultimately, Whether 은 implies contrast or not totally depends on the context and your intonation. Thinking carefully about why 이가 is used in questions asking who, what, or which will give you a better understanding of 이가. Let's look at some examples. When you ask, who did this? What's the focus? The focus is who, the subject of the action. So what do you use? You use 이가. 누가 이걸 했지? Now, let's say you ask, what caused the problem? The focus is what, the subject of the action. So you say, 무엇이 문제를 야기했지? Basically, when asking who, what, or which, you use 이가, not 는, because the focus is the subject. Alright, let's go back to the theory part. Hopefully, it makes more sense to you now. We've seen how 는 is used when drawing a contrast or when the focus is on the subject's action or description, especially in an existing context. 이가, on the other hand, is used when the subject itself is the focus, not its characteristics or actions. It is also used to introduce the subject into a new context for explanation. You might have noticed the terms subject marker and topic marker. Earlier, I told you to forget these terms, but now try to think carefully about why they are called subject marker and topic marker. 는 puts the focus on the topic related to the subject, such as its action or characteristics. 이가 puts the focus on the subject itself. I hope it all makes sense now. Another thing you might have noticed about these particles in practice is that they are frequently omitted in speech. When a particle doesn't play an obviously important role, or when the context is already clear, it is often left out. There are also other use cases of 는 and 이가 that I haven't explained in this video. I'm not going into detail on those now since it is a bit off topic, but feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions. The best way to master these particles is to create more opportunities to speak Korean by making Korean friends or joining a Korean community like sports clubs in Korea or online, so you get more chance to listen and talk. That's the key if you want to speak Korean fluently. Let's watch more example videos. While watching, think carefully about what we've learned today and feel free to pause the video and consider why 는 or 이가 is used in each context.
동물원은 정말 크다.
맞아. 놀이공원은 작긴 했어.
그지? 놀이공원이 좀 작았지.
이거 누가 먹었어?
내가 먹었어.
나는 못 먹었는데 이걸 다 먹었어?
미안해, 배가 고팠어.
I'll leave the explanation to you so that you can think it through, but please feel free to ask questions in the comments. I hope this video was helpful. I know this can be still confusing, but as I mentioned earlier, try to create more opportunities to speak and listen in Korean. Once you've collected enough contextual data about these particles, you will finally feel comfortable using them. And don't forget, I'm here to help, so don't hesitate to ask any Korean questions in the comments. I'll make sure to reply to them. That's it for today. If you like this video and want to watch more videos like this, please subscribe, like, and turn on notification for new videos. We also have many shorts under 30 seconds introducing Korean expressions you can't really learn from textbooks, like slang and idioms, but in a fun way. So make sure to check them out. My name is MJ Kim, and I'm the owner of this channel. I'll see you in the next video. 감사합니다.